What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the next video in the Build a Spotify app series. In the last two videos, we took a look at creating playlists and adding songs to them. In this one, we're going to take a look at saving albums to your library. So if that sounds good, make sure you start by liking the video down below, opening up Xcode, and let's jump back into our project. Now, the cool thing about albums is they're actually very similar to a lot of the code we wrote already for our library for playlists. So what I'm actually going to do is we're going to copy all of the code that we have in here, and I'm going to drop it into the other library controller that we have, which is library albums view controller. It's very, very similar. We're just going to edit it as needed. So the first thing that we want to actually do, well, the first thing we're going to actually do is fix the errors that we have in here. But from our API perspective, we want to get a user's current saved albums. So we're going to have to write a few API calls. But before we do that, let's change up stuff in here. So instead of having an array of playlists, we're going to be getting an array of album objects that the user has saved. We don't want to allow selection here, so we don't need this. This is going to be a no albums view, and we're going to reuse the same view that we created, which looks great. We're still going to want the same table view, so that can stay. Now, this is going to be table view delegate. That's complaining because we have to change the extension below, which we will in a moment. Fetch data we're going to need as well. We don't need this selection handler thing anymore. Now, this is called no albums view. This is also no albums view. And let's see, let's make sure that was the right thing. Yep, no albums view. All of that looks good in terms of laying it out. So setting up this, we want to go ahead and change all of the names here. And we're going to go ahead and change the view model. So this is going to be, let's see, we don't actually want a way to create an album. We're going to say browse instead. And we're going to say you don't have any saved albums yet. So you have not saved any albums yet. Let's make sure this is not and not newt. And let's see, that's looking good. And why is this complaining? Because we have not conformed yet. That makes sense. We're going to update this API caller stuff in a moment. So I'm just going to comment it out briefly. Continuing along, we have update UI. We can say if albums is empty, we can go ahead and show the no playlists or no albums view. Otherwise, we're just going to reload our table view. Here we have show create playlist. We don't need to create anything, so we can select and simply delete it. Go ahead and change these extensions to be, instead of library playlist, they are going to be library albums, albums view controllers. Make sure you spell it correctly. And when the user taps on this, what we actually want to do is when the user is on the third tab, we're actually just going to switch tabs. So we're going to say tab bar controller selected index, I think is what it's called. Selected index. Let's try that again. Selected index will be 0. So we'll switch the user back to the browse tab because we're telling the user to browse for albums, basically. Let's see, table view number of rows is going to be albums.count. The cell makes sense. We're going to get the nth album out of the albums playlist, and we're just going to configure it. So this will be album.name. This is going to be album dot, let's see, what's the subtitle going to be? Album dot, let's see, there should be an artist on here. This should be singular. We're going to say album dot artists dot first dot name. Otherwise, we're going to say it's a dash. And this one here will be album dot images, and we're going to get the first image. And let's continue along. Here, we're going to see what happens when we actually select a album. We just want to open that album up. So we're going to say the album is the nth album. The controller is now going to be, instead of a playlist view controller, it'll be a albums view controller, or album singular view controller. The parameter name is going to be album, and you're passing in the album model from right up above. All right. And this height can remain. So everything in here now should be compiling. If you hit Command B, we just now need to hook this up to the API. So right here, we were simply calling this, this API to get current user playlists. Instead, we're going to say get current user albums. And we are going to jump into our API caller and simply write this out. So I'm going to search for albums in here and find where we added this mark, and we're going to add in a function to fulfill that need. Takes in no parameters. It's going to have a completion block, and this will be an escaping closure that gives us a result back and an array of album objects, otherwise an error. And this closure returns void. We're going to go ahead and create this request. This will be a URL with the constant base API URL. We're going to add on whatever the suffix is. I'm going to bet that it's a get request since we're getting some object or objects rather. Now this is going to give us requests. I'm going to go ahead and line break that as well as that. Now we can go ahead and execute this request. And what I'm going to do is be super lazy and just copy the one right below it since it's going to save us a bunch of time. And let's just go ahead and fix up all of these. So let's see, this is going to give us some results back. And if I take a look at the API, it looks like it's similar to how playlists were, where there's one model and then it has items, which is an array of albums, I would imagine. But let me also, while I'm here, grab the endpoint suffix. So we're going to go ahead and add in that suffix. Let's see. So it should be right here. We don't need the v1 if I'm not mistaken. That's already a part of our base URL. And let's see, let's go ahead and let's just print out the result for the time being. We're going to decode all of this stuff. Let me see if I have any issues. This is an album. We're going to try to decode the data. Go ahead and hit Command B and let's see what the problem is here. We're saying create this with a request. And let's see, I typed request incorrectly. That's why it's yelling at me. And we also need to fix one more thing, apparently. Looks like we screwed this up here. We're saying self.albums is going to be the albums that we get back. This is back in the library albums controller. Go ahead and hit Command B, and that looks good too. The final thing I'm going to do is create a response model here because we don't have one that matches the exact thing that we need. So we're going to open up models. And we basically created one for library playlist response. We want this exact same thing for albums. So I'm just going to create a new file in this folder. And it's simply going to be called library albums response. Go ahead and create it and drop it in right there. And this is going to be library albums response. And this item is going to be of type album, just like that. Let's go back to our API caller. And we can now say, try to decode a library albums response. And the completion handler is going to take success. And from the result, the items, which should be an array of albums. So let's go ahead and hit Command R. And this should be handling the functionality to fetch albums. We now need to add the functionality to add a saved album or save an album, I guess. So if we come here and go to albums, it should tell us that there are no albums saved. So let me go back to library album view controller and let's see what's happening. So let's see, we should do update UI. Let me see if their API call actually succeeded. It looks like it failed actually. So it's saying library album response and items is empty. Okay, interesting. So that actually didn't fail. It is correct. We're saying update UI. So we're saying if albums is empty, we're going to say no album view is hidden as false. So let's go ahead and give this a nice background color of red. And we should be seeing that no album response view. I just don't know where it's actually showing. It's a good thing to know that our API response is working though. So there is our, this should be our view for the library album view. Let's see what I'm doing wrong. I'm going to set a background color to this view. For this controller, we'll say it is green. And let's see, we're adding a subview for the table view. We're also saying set up the no playlist. We should probably rename this to be set up no albums view and rename the function down here as well. We're adding that as a subview. All right, that all looks right to me. I have a hunch this has to do with the layout now being kind of wrong. So let's see when the API is actually called, because I have a hunch that that's kind of partially the problem. So when you go to this tab, it looks like the API is called right away. And there is our view. So we should be coming into here. So I'm going to put a breakpoint there. And we're going to give this a run once more. And let's see, we come into there. That makes sense. Okay. And we come over here, but we don't see our views. So what the heck is going on? So we're saying configure the delegates and all of that stuff. Where is our layout? So our albums, no albums frame. Let's not go ahead and center it. Let's get rid of the frame. Let's see if the UI is showing up for this. All right. Interesting. We should see it right there. Okay, there is our view. So that looks to be correct. So what I think is going on is when we say we want to go ahead and center this, it's actually using the frame coordinates of the container so it doesn't center appropriately. So the way I'm going to center this appropriately is we are going to say that the y is view height subtracting 150 divided by 2, since 150 here is the width and height. And the x is going to be the same thing, but it's going to be view width subtracting 50 divided by 2. And we're also going to get rid of the green background color. And I think I set a red background color on this guy as well. Go ahead and give it a run, and we should see that 0 state view where it gives us a browse button. All right, awesome. So it's saying you have not saved any albums yet. Go ahead and browse for albums, and we hit browse, and it takes us back to tab number 1. So now when I go into an album, we should have an option up here to save it. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to open up the album view controller, which is basically the view controller responsible for rendering a single album. And at the top of, or the bottom of view did load, if I could find it, we are going to say, add a navigation item, but let me just go and clean this up. So I'm going to move that API call into its own function that's called fetch data, just to keep things a little more organized. And here we'll say navigation item dot right bar button item is a UI bar button item bar, let's see, bar button item. We want to spell that correctly. And it is going to be of type action. Target will be self. And the selector, or the action rather, is going to be did tap, let's see, did tap actions. And we're going to show an action sheet, hence actions, when the user taps on this, of which one of the options will be to save. So I'm going to say action sheet. It's going to be a UI alert controller. The title here is going to be the name of the album. So let's go ahead and say album.name. The message is going to be actions, but we're going to spell it correctly. And the preferred style will be action sheet. At the bottom here, we're going to want to present this action sheet. Animated will be true, and the completion will be nil, just like that. And let's see, we want to go ahead and actually add in some options. We're going to say action sheet, add action, UI alert action, title. First one will be cancel, cancel, and nil for the handler. Next one will be of type default for style. We'll say save album. And in the handler here, we're actually going to call our API function, which is pretty simple. We're going to say API caller shared, and we are going to save the album. And I actually just realized I don't even think we added that API call. So let's go ahead and do that. So here is the API reference for it. So let's jump back into our API caller class. And I'm going to add a new function here. And it's going to be save album. And we're going to say album. It should more likely be called like add library or add album to library, but we'll stick with save album. It's going to take a completion. All right, we're going to have an escaping that gives us a Boolean back if it succeeded. Pretty good. Now in here, we want to create a request. You guys know the drill at this point. It's going to be a string, which will be a constant base API URL plus some suffix. Now I believe this one is separate. So this one is a put request, which is like an update action in REST. So we're going to say .put. We have not created that yet, so we'll do that momentarily. And this is going to give us a request back to us. All right, let's go to the bottom where we have all the cases. And I'm just going to add in here a case for put. And let's go back up to the top. And now that we have a request here, we can go ahead and I think we actually need to edit the request body. So I'm going to say base request, and we're going to have a var request. All right. We're going to need to kick it off. Let's see if I can get away with copy and pasting. We'll go ahead and copy and paste this right here, the task, which basically executes the task. If it fails, we don't have a result. We have a true or false. This one is going to be true. This one is going to be false. And let's see, instead of decoding into a appropriate model, we're just going to use JSON serialization, since all we really want to do is check if it was added or not. And let's see what we get back if it was added. It looks like, interesting, we don't actually get anything back. We just get an HTTP code. So what I'm going to do is, what we're going to do in here is we should probably check the HTTP code, but since we're lazy, we're just going to say completion is true if you have gotten this far, which we will see if that is the case or not. What you could also do is you do have the response here, like so, and I think the response has the status code on it, so we can say code is response dot, nope, not request, we want response dot status code. Let's see, there should be a status code. So response as HTTP response, URL response. And then from this, you can actually get the status code. So we can say dot status code. And I guess we might as well do it the right way. So this should give us a 201 back if it is successful. So there is our code. So we can also unwrap this. So we'll say guard let data is that. Let the code is the response as a URL response dot status code. And here we're going to say if the code is 201, we are going to say it's true. And I'm also going to print out the code. Now we need to also say in the request what actual, so let's see, data we don't care about. We want to say in the request what album do we want to actually save. So let's see, it looks like we also need to say content type as application JSON. So I'm going to say here request set value application JSON for the header of content type, which looks good. Let's see what else we need. All right, all right. So we also, let's see, oh, it looks like that was optional, but we added it, so whatever at this point. We also have a query parameter of IDs, which is a comma separated array, or I guess just comma separated list of the IDs of the albums we want to add. So this is a query param. So what we can do is here in the URL, I'm going to go ahead and say IDs equals the album.id. And I just realized we never even added the URL. So this is going to be v1/me/albums. So we'll go ahead and copy and paste it. And that should be sufficient. I think we need a slash right there. Actually, I don't even think we need the v1. I keep making that mistake. We just need the actual path. Our base URL holds the actual version. So we'll just say /me, just like we did up here. And now we can actually go and call this function. So we would be adding a playlist from the album, rather adding an album from the album view controller. So let's jump back to the album view controller. And we had started writing this out here in the action sheet. We're going to say shared. And we're going to say add album, or what did I call it? Save album. This is going to be self.album. Completion will have a success. And let's see, let's go ahead and say weak self here so we don't cause a memory leak. Guard let strong self is self. Else we're going to go ahead and simply return. This you can now say is strong self.album. And I'm going to go ahead and print out added, or we can say saved rather. And this is simply going to be the success parameter that we get back from this closure, the inbound. So go ahead and give it a run and let's see this in action. So currently we don't actually have any albums. So we should come here and it should tell us go and browse. Okay. So we're going to browse for some albums. I'm going to look for something I like. So let's see, 29 by Carly Pierce. Why not? We're going to click on this. We'll click action. This is a great album. So I'm going to go ahead and want to save it. So I'll hit save album. Let's take a look here. It looks like it gave us a 200 back. Interesting. So we'll see if that actually succeeded, because a 200 is traditionally an OK, but a 201 is created. So I'm not sure why it's giving us a 200 back, but let's go ahead and go back to our albums. And I'm going to relaunch the app because we have not added the code to auto update this yet. And it actually looks like we got an album back. So let me see. So let's go back to our library album view controller. The reason I'm saying it looks like we got an album back is because I don't see anything here. And that's usually because in this controller, we're not getting the no albums. So at this point, we should be getting a table view. So let's see what's going on. So we're assigning the albums here. If albums is empty, do this. Otherwise, do this. And I have a hunch of our table views layout is also wrong. So we're saying view.bounds. Instead, I'm going to say this is CG rect 0, 0, view.width, and view.height. Go ahead and give that a run, and we should start seeing a table view of albums, which we don't. What the heck is going on? So let's go ahead and add a breakpoint now. I also am going to print out the actual albums that we get here. We'll say print albums that we get back from the API. And we're going to add a breakpoint into here as well. So we're not seeing the no albums, which leads me to believe that we should be getting albums back, which it looks like we are not. Let me go to this tab. Are we even calling this API at this point? I'm not sure. Let's see, where is our print statement? This is library albums. It's the right controller. So let me go ahead and say this is albums. And we're going to interpolate albums into here just like that. We should definitely see our print statement getting fired off, unless I commented something out and I forgot somewhere. But let's see, we're not actually getting that back. So something unusual is happening. This isn't getting hit either, nor is that getting hit. So let's see what is going on. So we're going to click into this get current user albums. And let's see. So we have a task, which we kick off. I'm going to print out. Let me print out right here, getting current albums. I wonder if doing that initial test of adding an album did something funny to our account. So let's go to this tab, and it says getting current albums, but it looks like, it's saying the data, oh, duh, it's saying the data could not be read because it's missing. So that means we're actually not serializing it correctly. Okay, interesting. So instead, I'm going to say JSON serialization, JSON object with data, allowing fragments, and we're going to print out what we're getting back as the JSON, because we are getting something back. It's just not in the proper format. So let's see which thing is not getting returned properly. So here is all of our information that we're getting back for the particular playlist. Items points to an array of there's added at, and it has the album in it as well. So, okay, so that's a little interesting. So let's go ahead and change our codable models here. So it's not that we're not getting the data back. I just messed up the actual decodable object. So in this response, our items is a saved album, we'll say. So this is a saved album, codable. And this has an album on it. And then it also has, it appears, let's see, each of these in this super long response also has a string, which is added at, which is presumably when we went ahead and added this into our saved library. So album is album. This is an array of each of these, which I have called saved album. And the one other thing which is unusual, because their documentation says a 201 is created, is that we're getting a 200 back from the particular response. So let's go ahead and go back to our API caller. And instead of checking for a 200, let me go ahead and check for, instead of checking for a 201, let's go and check for a 200, which is an OK response from HTTP. So go ahead and give it a run once more. And let's see, what did I screw up? This is JSON decoder, results. This should be results.items. Ah, I see. So now items is actually an array of saved albums. And we are going to compact map this and simply get the $0.album out for each of the values. That way the completion handler still returns an array of albums. Let's go ahead and try this for the 25th time. And we should see hopefully data being printed. Okay, awesome. We're seeing that. If I go to this, we should see our albums, and we do. Look at that, awesome. So let's get rid of all these annoying print statements because those are gonna get super annoying super quickly. The last thing we're gonna do before we wrap up this video is right now we see this album here, but if I go and add another album, let's see, I like, I don't know, if I come across this one and I really like it, and I'm gonna go ahead and hit this, I'm gonna say, okay, save this album, right? We see that, okay, it definitely saved, but our UI didn't update, so what gives, right? Well, if we go ahead and run the app again, close and reopen, you'll see that that album is in the saved list. So the problem is actually not the fact that we're not saving. The problem is that we're not updating this view controller once the call succeeds. So what I'm going to do is we're going to use notifications to go ahead and update that view controller, refresh it rather. But the first thing I'll do is let's get rid of all these print statements because there's way too many of them. And a good practice for notifications that you want to use is if you go to the extensions file that we created, we're going to add our custom notification as an extension. Once again, if you forgot to open up this window to search, it's Command-Shift-O. Go ahead and add an extension on notification.name. And we're going to add a custom one in here, which will be static. And this is going to be called album, let's see, album saved notification. And this is going to be a custom notification with a custom name. So I'm just going to assign it to one respectively, just like that. And what we could do now is we can go to our album view controller, and we can basically say, if we succeeded, go ahead and post that notification. And this is if we succeeded in saving the particular album. We're going to say notification center default. We're going to go ahead and post a notification with a given name, which will be the new one we created. You can just prefix it with a dot since it'll pick it up statically, and the object will be nil. Now, what we want to do on the other side of the receiving side of the notification, which is library albums view controller, we just want to observe for the notification if it got fired or not. So we want to have an object to hold on to the observer, which is going to be of type NS object protocol. This isn't actually a protocol, so don't get confused by the name. But at the bottom here, we can now say observer is notification center dot default, since it's the shared instance. And we want to go ahead and add an observer using that particular name and main thread. So here is the name we're going to observe. The object is nil. The queue is main. And we're going to use this closure here. It's going to get fired every time this notification is posted. So I'm going to go ahead and Control I that to clean it up. And what are we going to do every single time that the user goes ahead and saves a playlist? Well, we want to basically fetch data again. So we're going to say self.fetch data. And at the top of fetch data, what I'm going to do is any of the current albums that we have, we're going to remove all of them, which is the current model array. And that'll go ahead and refetch and simply reload our table view. That way we'll always have the latest up-to-date list of saved albums. So if I come into here, and there's 2 at the moment, and actually we can even tap on them and open them because we hooked that up already. We can come back and let's search for an album. Let's say if I wanted to search for an album by, let's search for an album by, I don't know, All American Rejects. They have a bunch of albums. Let me come down here and find one of their albums. I think we did them all the way at the bottom. Here are some of their albums. So here's All American. This is not by them, but let's go ahead and save this. We're going to hit action and we're going to save this album. And let's come back here. And there is our newly saved album right at the top, All American by Hoodie Allen. So let me do that a few more times because it's pretty cool to see everything hooked up and in action. So Let's search for a new album. We'll search for let's just search for Drake since that comes to mind. We'll swipe to the bottom and here are all of Drake's albums. Let's say I want to save this one. All right, that's saved. Once again, we're not checking for the edge case of, saving it multiple times. I'm not sure what's going to actually happen. So you probably want to actually do that, right? You don't want to show the option for the user to save an album if it's already saved. Maybe instead what you want to do is show them the option to remove from their library. So we'll go ahead and save this. Back here in our library, under albums, we have all of our saved albums. And there you have it. That's all I've got for this video. Most of our app is pretty well put together. So here is our playlist, our albums, our search UI, our search results, all these awesome categories. We have browse. You can tap into each playlist. You can even play the audio. In the next video, we're going to go ahead and add in some haptics and clean up our code a little bit if need be. So if you haven't liked the video already, make sure to do so. Helps out quite a bit. Comment any questions, concerns, issues, and definitely subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.